Today, our guest is Subhanu Saxena, who is the managing partner at the new Rhein Healthcare. We're going to talk about leaders who seek to create mindful organizations and how they do this. Subhanu, thank you so much for joining us. What's the most important leadership topic at this particular point in history?
One of the most important topics and agenda items for leaders is how do we create and build leaders who can unite diverse groups of people around a common purpose, and a purpose that goes beyond the numbers, beyond profit, and gets us back to some of the core principles that great leaders have espoused over generations, that business is a force for good in society. Great leaders unite, they do not divide. And so how do we cultivate a new generation of integrative, inclusive leaders that orient what we do to also have a positive impact in the societies they operate?
Do you have a solution to that?
I'm not sure if I have a solution to that, but one of the principles from the ancient wisdom of the East is to start by really knowing yourself before you can know and help others. And there's a verse in the Urdu language which says, before you meet other people in this world, know the person inside. And what it gets to is the power of introspection and the ability to be more contemplative. We live in a world where we're judged by outer actions, but if they're not informed by inner awareness, often that's what causes some of the issues we see in society. And therefore, giving people the ability to introspect. My old vice chairman would say, you have to be liberated. You have to be very self-aware of what makes you successful and where your blind spots are, which allows you to be a more humble, authentic leader in many ways. And the ability to be vulnerable is a very important quality in leadership.
I assume you meditate.
Yes.
There are some people who are concerned that this may be some weird thing that they can't do.
One of the most important lessons in life is to be able to show up in your relationships, in the workplace. What does that mean? Is to be fully present. And we've had experience where you're in a meeting with somebody and if they're checking their phone or if they're distracted, they're not really with you in the room. And that's a fatal flaw in a leader. But those who've been with fully present leaders feel inspired, challenged, and engaged. And mindfulness practices are very much just about giving you the greatest gift you can, which is time with yourself, and to be fully conscious of what does it mean to be in the moment, be fully present, fully aware. And imagine the energy that you take from that in every interaction with those around you, if you're able to bring that to everything you do. The greatest teachings from the ancient traditions is if you can turn every act into one where you're fully aware and present in the moment and you lose yourself in the moment, it unlocks an energy that really connects with others and makes you more impactful in everything you do. I don't think people should see this as something outside of themselves. This is something that you all have had experience with. If you've listened to a quiet piece of music, you've been able to lose yourself. When you go for a walk, you have these moments of just being in the moment with the beauty of nature. Take that energy you felt and bring it to everything you do. It's not rocket science. And the point about these mindfulness techniques is not to somehow say, I got to control the mind. It's about just being aware of where you are at any moment in time, and wherever the mind goes, be aware it's going somewhere. And then like children playing in the park, you quietly shepherd it back, but you let it play. And you're just aware of that. And that inculcates over time a discipline and a practice that you can bring the mind to where you want it to be. And as Mathieu Ricard has said, the Buddhist monk who works with the Dalai Lama, is we spend our life training our bodies in the gym. How much time do we spend mind training?
In my classes, I call it weightlifting for the brain.
Yeah, mind training. That's what we talk about.
We don't want our bodies to be flabby, but we don't mind our brains being flabby.
Yeah, and I think what modern neuroscience and psychology tells us is you stay active, you stay young. The brain is one of the most powerful organs we have. It's there to be used, and the more you use it, the more it flourishes.
If we are thinking hateful, negative stuff on a regular basis, it actually changes our physiology.
Yeah, and I think history has always had two opposing forces. One, at the societal level, we are to some extent tribal, which tends to separate. But at the other level, research has told us that children are innately compassionate in nature and playful. And we've all had the experience of the joy of just selfless giving to someone we love, and the joy we get when we make someone else happy who we care about. So I think one of the challenges in leadership is how to overcome some of those societal pressures. We often say organizations divide. People collaborate because there is this innate ocean of well-being and that compassion in all of us. We just have to unlock it. It's not as if it's something foreign to our nature. It was there when we were born, but it gets covered over time.
I like that idea that it is innately there. I'm not putting something in the container. In fact, I'm removing some of the debris that has collected.
So the highest teachings in the Advaita tradition of Vedanta, the non-dualism tradition, is it says the path to the truth is not to point it out, but is to remove misconceptions around it. So taking away layers of ignorance. And then the truth has always been there, ever present. You just haven't noticed it. The example I give, sometimes you'll be driving to work and looking straight ahead, and you may not have noticed the beautiful scenery to the side that was always there. You just never paid attention to it. So a lot of this journey is about helping you pay attention to the strength that's already within you and those oceans and those wells of well-being that are there. And you just have to let them out.
Again, this idea that I don't have to find and pour more stuff into my head, kind of the Japanese tea ceremony, that when the cup is full, the cup is full. It's discovering the beautiful painted image on the bottom of the cup.
Absolutely. And encapsulate this as a principle from the ancient Sanskrit texts of how to be outwardly supremely active, yet inwardly supremely inactive. Realizing it's about being versus doing. And getting people comfortable to being themselves. And this comes back to authentic leadership, where I think the goal of great leaders is to create a culture and an environment where you allow people to come to work as themselves and be themselves. Now, to do that, you have to be authentic. You have to come to work as yourself. So how to create that self-awareness, to be authentic, to be vulnerable, humanize yourself as a leader.
In general, I love the idea of authenticity. And yet there are a few people I've come across who can be unkind and obnoxious. Do we want them to be authentically unkind and obnoxious?
I have the view that you always want people to be who they are, because otherwise, how do you know how best to interact with them? And we come with enough masks in life. The word persona comes from the Latin through sound, when actors would have a mask on and speak through a little hole where the sound would come. And masks divide. I'd rather know the person than not. And our experience is actually we have a much more powerful way of connecting to people when we are who we are, good, bad, or indifferent. So we had a wonderful, many years ago, a team leadership experience that I was quite skeptical about, but was one of the most profound spiritual experiences I ever had, where we did a team session with horses, who are some of the most intuitive animals. 5,000 years of fight or flight response attunes them to the inner energy of a person. And our tasks were to get the horses to do things with us without a rein.
Okay.
But to somehow connect with the inner energy of the horse by standing with them. And the only way you could do it was to drop your guard, be who you are, whatever it was. Only then would the horse follow you. And I remember a couple of exercises that really stuck with me is I somehow found this amazing connection with a horse and was following me. And then I just turned to look at the horse, and then the horse stopped and I kept walking. And the trainer said, "Why did you do that?" I said, "I don't know." And he said, "Did you think you weren't trusting that the horse would follow you?" And I said, "Maybe." He said, "Do you think the horse picked it up?" So the horse picked up, I wasn't trusting the horse. So the ability to be yourself gives you the opportunity to connect whoever you are. And to be honest, if someone has those traits, you'd rather know them than not. So you know what you're dealing with. And then you can help them.
What if they're doing damage until they get help?
My experience is people who are of that nature are in pain or in fear.
Okay.
Driven by some experience or some life event or some framing of them. And insecurity drives a lot of these actions. So part of it is, how do you create that safe space? Or recognize that person just doesn't fit into the environment that they're in, and they're better off in another environment. Often the tough job of leadership to say to someone, "This is not working," but to understand why it's not working. It could just be it's not a great fit for that person. A sinner in one scenario could be a saint in another.
Ah, okay.
And I think that's an important thing not to lose. By and large, unless you're inherently wired to be a psychopath, people like to do good work. And if you look at most inter-office politics and situations, those people don't come to work saying, "I want to watch the world burn," to use the phrase from Dark Knight. They want to do a good job. They're just not so over being able to find their ability to do it in the environment that's created. So I often ask myself, if someone is not performing, first, probably my fault. Have I set the person up for success? Have I played to their strengths?
Okay.
Have I understood their real motivations or not? Have I created an environment where warring factions can work together on some transcendent goal?
So a sense of purpose.
Purpose, exactly.
Okay.
And the great way to get people to collaborate is give them another enemy, as an example, or another goal that transcends their petty individual goals. So I think a lot of onus goes on us as leaders to create that climate before writing someone off as disruptive. And I've had experience of a couple of people that came across that, but realized that A, we were not playing to what they were good at, or B, we were not setting them up for success because I created mutually opposing objectives with others. So I inherently set up conflict.
So we look
without
at
the trust.
children who misbehave, and we often say the classroom's structured improperly or something.
Yeah.
But with adults, we assume that they're supposed to
Figure it out somehow. And why should that be? Versus we should ask ourselves, did we set it up for the right climate in the first place?
So let's go back to mindfulness then. So you as a leader, you've mentioned you've had some of these situations. How did mindfulness help you navigate that situation?
I think one of the most powerful lessons I learned actually was from a German boss.
Okay.
It was a joke, not a joke, a term of endearment. He'd call me Swami. He'd say, Swami, before taking a decision, speak to 5 people.
Okay.
And what he meant by that is don't just knee-jerk react to the last thing you heard. Spend the time to actually reflect, get input from multiple sources, and then make a decision. And I have to say, those contemplative practices train you to not jump to the nearest decision or the last thing you heard. To Malaysian society, people read the last email as the gospel truth and then just react to it versus, have I got the full facts? Have I got the full picture? And there's a very interesting turn in a leader's journey where you get to a certain point in your career by being shown or showing that you're decisive, judgmental, can react and get stuff done.
Yeah.
What do I look for when I create a board of directors? I want people who are curious, who ask purposeful, probing questions, who have a desire to understand, who have a desire to listen more than speak. Those are very different skills, and many people don't realize those. But those can come from the leaders who are very self-aware, liberated, who are contemplative in nature, and I think at a certain point in many leaders' journeys, they open themselves up to that. I wish we got to more leaders younger to show them this is actually going to be important in your life journey and it'll make you more effective as a leader.
Much of my work has to do with developmental maturity.
Yeah.
And as people go through steps in maturity, they become more cognitively complex, more emotionally intelligent. Their behaviors align more with their values. Their time horizon becomes longer. And one of the activities that we look at to move through those levels consistently is a reflection practice.
Absolutely.
So whether it's meditation or journaling or something that is, I'm quieting the mind, and I'm also opening myself up to reflect on what I did that I'm most proud of and what I did that I am, in my case, horrified by. And what am I doing? And how do I self-correct before getting corrected?
And I think for those out there who may be a little scared of that, being so open with themselves and that vulnerability, I think there's an important tool that's available that helps a lot of folks and that I believe strongly in, is the access to a mentor or a coach in that journey to provide you with that contemplative space. You know, one of the bits of research that highly impacted me when I read about it is work that was done on underprivileged children in underprivileged societies. And the question was initially phrased as, why do such children not succeed? No progress was made. And then someone had the idea to turn the question around to say, in these difficult underprivileged societies, granted many don't succeed, but there are some who do. Let's study why they succeed. And then some important findings came. First, how some of these kids were naturally optimistic and resilient, but they had access to a role model. Okay. They had access to a mentor. And the way I define a mentor is someone who believes in you more than you believe in yourself. And such mentors can be very tough with you. My grandfather, I call him as a mentor. A couple of times he made me cry. But he would say, Subhanu, you have an ability to change the world. And he instilled a belief in me that I didn't see in myself. But having access to a coach or a mentor gives you that contemplative space, slightly external to the practices we're talking about, but can inculcate that joy of introspection so that then the person can do it on their own. And often being able to be the mirror for somebody is something that as we develop leaders, we must develop them to be better coaches.
Part of leading is inspiring those who follow me.
And unleashing the gifts in others. That's what leadership should be about. And I'm lucky I teach in my outside of work. I teach Sanskrit. And I've seen just the power of when the light bulb goes off. And so I try and bring that into the corporate sphere also, and recognize that every day is your chance to train yourself to be a better leader, a better coach. And so these are skills I think if we can give to leaders, allow them to help bring others along the journey also.
I get the meditation, I train my mind, but then there's this other part of I have to reflect on and correct or adjust what I'm doing. Can you share a little bit about your practice in doing that?
There are a couple of things. One is when you give yourself time with yourself and you say, this is the most risk-free zone I have with myself, to really force yourself to say, what am I doing well and where am I falling short of the mark? And therefore to say, okay, where do I need help to change what I'm doing?
And often as leaders, we're not comfortable asking for that help.
We're not, and I know that's why this notion I talked about earlier of vulnerability, I think, is a hallmark of a great leader. I have to say one thing that helped me maybe, and I reflected on it when I think about planning the career steps for others, is I had some very tough assignments early in my life, and different ones. I never followed a linear career path. And I think having that exposure early and seeing that I could bounce back taught me that actually throw yourself out for different experiences, and it's okay to be the stupid guy in the room and actually not be afraid to ask the dumb question, because that's how you learn. And I think people that have had a very, shall we say, protected career trajectory or very protected upbringing may be a little bit more reticent of opening themselves up to that. Whereas those who've gone through immense adversity, so I have a very dear friend who had a near-death car crash in his 20s. And he said it liberated him in his life and his career. He said, life's short, I'm going to do what matters. And in work, he would say something didn't feel right. He'd just say no, because he'd been to the edge and he came back. And that, I'm not recommending everyone goes through those traumatic experiences, but there's a lot of research that talks about how people who've had these difficult experiences somehow have a more expansive, compassionate view of the world and of themselves, and the ability to be more self-reflective and self-critical. And I think how do we engineer that in the business world is give people tough assignments early in life and show that you've got their back. Send them around the world, see the world. I think the fact that early in our career we went to live in Moscow in Russia, what a wonderful experience. And it taught me that you have to ask a question when you do anything. What's the worst case? And if the worst case isn't going to kill you or harm you, it'll be a great learning experience. And so when you have that mindset, then it's all about gathering rich experiences.
I'm hearing the word recently a lot, grit. It gives us the grit or the tenacity to deal with the things that are hard.
Yeah. And I think there's an important point here to be made, which is these practices, it's not about shying away from being sad or happy. But actually, it's about actually recognizing and being fully experiencing awareness to sadness. If you're going to live, life's going to happen, good and bad. But it's about letting it happen on that ocean of well-being that's within all of us. So these emotions flit across the sky like a bird, like a trail of an aeroplane or something. They come and they go. So it's not about shutting yourself off from those emotions, but being actually fully present and aware of them. And that somehow taps a much deeper experience of life and well-being that is much richer for it. So it's not about just trying to be happy all the time or sad. It's about just being and letting these things come as waves through you and through those to just open up an even deeper, richer way of living.
What a great way to end this segment is the idea that there is nothing to be avoided, but instead to embrace
life in all its forms.
I appreciate your sharing your wisdom with our listeners and with me.
It was my absolute pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.